Hello everybody. So today I want to cover MicroStrategy and specifically the question of debt. Do they have too much debt? And I'm going to compare them to some of the largest S&P 500 companies, at least in the Ford and Verizon version. I'm going to compare MicroStrategy to what happens when well-known companies also take debt and invest in the business. So let's get started answering that question about the debt. And by the way, this video is inspired by one of the savvy comments I got in my former MicroStrategy video where someone said, MicroStrategy has too much debt, Ponzi, exclamation mark, note the exclamation mark. So this savvy commenter will recognize themselves. And so I figured I would explore that a second. I also modified the last investor presentation. So this is modified by me, right? You can't find this anywhere. I modified it by adding the $3 billion of convertible debt that Michael Saylor added that's going to mature in 2029 at 0%, right? And they did 0%. That way they don't have to pay an annualized expense for it. And they will have a conversion price of $672. So if you add up all of the debt that they add, and notice how they staggered these maturities really well, 27, 28, 29, 2030, 2031, 2032, all back-to-back maturities. The debt matures in a well-laddered way. If you add it all up, including the most recent debt, what do you get? They have $7.26 billion of debt for a current market capitalization of about $85 billion. And you may think it's a lot in an absolute amount. If you think absolutely, if you think it's a sum in the absolute, yeah, $7.2 billion is a lot, but you have to take that debt to compare it against the market value of the company, i.e. the market capitalization of a company, which is $85 billion. The stock, the whole company trades at a value of $85 billion. So it has $7.2 billion of debt. It trades at $85 billion, which means that the debt to market cap is 8.5%. If we want to say this in a way we understand, if you had a $100,000 house, market value of your house is $100,000, that would be $8,500 in mortgage. If you had a $300,000 house, that would be $25,500 in mortgage. In other words, a household would think this is not much. A household would think this is next to nothing. But of course, MicroStrategy is not a household. It is a company. So I might want to compare it to other companies. And I'm going to take well-known companies that use debt to power their business, which should be because MicroStrategy does that for a part of the business. MicroStrategy supercharges the business with debt. They issue common equity on the other side, but one side of the business of MicroStrategy is to issue debt to fund the business of MicroStrategy, the treasury business, i.e. buying the Bitcoin. Well, there's companies that also issue debt to fund their business. And I took a few well-known companies. So Verizon, right? The leading telecom company in the US next to AT&T. Verizon, a leading telecom company, right? They own all of these cell towers and we have all of this network, 99% coverage in the whole USA. You know the ads. They have $178 billion in debt for a market cap of $187 billion. Now let's talk about Ford. We all know Ford, right? The Henry Ford, the inventor of the assembly line. Very storied company. So they have $159 billion of debt and $44 billion in market cap. And let's say WBA, which is Walgreens, and of course in the US you see Walgreens in every corner of every street just about. Walgreens, it's got $34 billion in debt for $8 billion of market cap. So all of a sudden, MicroStrategy with $7 billion for $85 billion in market cap, that doesn't look like a lot of debt, does it? When you look at, say, a Ford that has $159 billion of debt for $44 billion of market cap. All of these companies issue debt, and they do something with that debt. Verizon, Ford, and Walgreens, they invest in the business to hopefully generate money to pay off the debt. MicroStrategy, they invest in Bitcoin with that debt, and they hope to repay the debt via conversion, i.e. issue stock. They hope to issue stock in the future, repay that debt. I'm getting ahead of myself. How does MicroStrategy repay the debt? Well, it's very simple. They issue the debt today, they buy the Bitcoin today, and they dilute in the different years down the road. You can see for the 3 billion, the latest convertible they issued at 3 billion, they will dilute at 672 a share in 2029. And so how does MicroStrategy make money? How do they generate a yield? Well, they accrete, i.e. they dilute the shareholder more slowly than they add Bitcoin to the balance sheet. And this is the latest 8K. In the latest 8K, you can see they added plus 104% of Bitcoin between late 2023 and today, late November. They added more than 100% of Bitcoin on the balance sheet, and they only diluted down the road dilution, by the way. The dilution has not happened yet, but assuming they repay off the debt via dilution, they've only diluted by 28%. You dilute the shares outstanding by 28%. That's bad. But you add the Bitcoin on balance sheet by 104%. So that's not bad. And of course, you generate a yield based off of that. And MicroStrategy, they will repay, like I said, by issuing new shares if I have a form of a convertible. But even if the convertible did not reach the strike price, let's assume the price of Bitcoin stays flat for the next 5 years. Well, they can still issue some common stock to repay that debt, or they can issue regular debt to refinance it. There's many ways they can do it. So let's look at the players with debt. MicroStrategy, $7.6 billion in debt, $85 billion. How will they repay? They will repay via dilution. Let's look at Verizon. Verizon is investing in its network. They hope to repay via a return on investment on their capital outlays, their capital investment. They invested heavily in that network of cell phone. Now, of course, why do they think they can take on so much debt, right? Because the cell phone is a very secure business. There is no such thing such as very credible threat, like say direct to cell, Starlink direct to cell, ubiquitous coverage, world coverage, voice and data, text, all via satellite. Satellite cell phone is never going to be a thing, which is why they don't have a problem borrowing so much money. This is not a house of cards, right? And you know I'm being facetious here. I think this is a very risky proposition, and it's funny that these companies are so high in the index and they're not considered risky in the index. How about Ford? Ford is a well-known company, unlike MicroStrategy, unlike Bitcoin. Cars are well known. Cars have been around for more than 100 years. Bitcoin has only been around for 14 years. And MicroStrategy, 20 years. So Ford is a solid company, yes. And so they have so much debt. And you realize none of this is financial advice, none of this is financial advice. But anyways, they invest in the plans and they hope to make a return on investment on the capex, right? So, and if you look at Ford, of course, if you follow the world of cars, of automakers right now, you know, they're struggling. Ford made the wise decision to stop making cars because they weren't making money making cars. So now they have no cars at Ford. The smallest thing you can buy now is a SUV there. They don't even have cars anymore for a car company. Think about that. And they were planning investing a lot of money in the F-150, thinking the F-150 would be a success. Well, turns out there's not enough demand. They're going to have to pause the F-150. And of course, there's a truck that doesn't look like a truck, you know, that apparently is the best-selling pickup truck, EV pickup truck in America, the Cybertruck, with 50% market share. That's too bad because Ford had kind of bet the house on the F-150. And so if you look at Ford, you know, they are in trouble. And of course, their dealers are not really sold on the transition. And they bet so much money on that transition. Is the return on investment on the capex for Ford guaranteed? Is the return on investment for the capex for Verizon guaranteed? Right? Yes, Bitcoin could still fail, but Bitcoin is a whole different animal. It's outperformed every single asset class ever since it was introduced, right? So one of them you invested in Bitcoin, you do nothing. The other one you invested in business endeavors that are risky, but the managers can't see the risk because of that myopia. And the last one I'll say is Walgreens. Walgreens in trouble. Why? Because Americans like to pick up pharmacy now at the local grocery store, your Kroger's or your Walmart, but more importantly, eventually they like to pick up the pharmacy online. And you can see companies like Walgreens, like CVS, they had a grand plan. They invested it into tons of retail location. Turns out retail pharmacy, a lot of people are moving away from it. And a key question for all of these companies that have a lot of debt, not MicroStrategy, but all of these companies that have a lot of debt, a key question is what will happen to them if they lose just 15% of their sales? Because that's the key. When you have so much leverage, losing a little bit of your income does not forgive. Losing a little bit of your income can put you in trouble when you get so much leverage. That's the problem with highly leveraged businesses. If they lose 15% of their sales, they could be in much greater trouble than just losing 15% of a business, because at some point you can't meet the debt obligation because you invested in the wrong business endeavor. On the other hand, Bitcoin is not a business endeavor. It's just a digital commodity. It's a digital asset. It's digital real estate. It is simple, very simple, and that's the key to the investment thesis. Verizon, they invested in stores, they invested in cell towers in an era where it turns out the cell towers are likely going to be mini satellites operated by Starlink and other companies. Ford invested a lot of money in the EV transition, but turns out the dealers are resisting. The dealers don't like it, and the historic customers of Ford don't really like EVs either. Right? Walgreens did that by investing in stores, what it knew how to do, but turns out people like online pharmacies. This is something that I talk about a lot on this channel with my investment in HIMS, the disruption of 45,000 retail pharmacies and what's going to happen to them. On the other hand, MicroStrategy's decision was very simple. In fact, it requires just one decision, one very high quality decision, in my view, a decision that a lot of retail investors have made a long time ago. For me, my Bitcoin investing decision is old now. It was a while back, right? They just made the simple decision to buy Bitcoin and to borrow a little bit. Yes, they issue equity, and yes, they borrow. Right now, the plan is 50% borrowing, 50% issuing equity to buy Bitcoin. And if Occam's razor is to be believed, what does Occam's razor tell us? Is that the simplest solution, the law of parsimony, the simplest solution is often the best solution. So maybe MicroStrategy figured out a new way to invest in the future, which is simply bet on that transition of the next big thing, the next asset, the transition to digital real estate, to a digital blockchain. So hopefully that video helped us put into perspective the debt and note how I used these companies, note how I did not open the rabbit holes that are banks and held to maturity assets at banks, which is a whole other can of worms that I'm not going to touch at least for the next few weeks. So anyways, this was not financial advice, not investment advice. This is just entertainment. Hoping you were entertained. Please like, please subscribe. Follow me on Patreon. Follow me on X. Thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful, wonderful day.